I'll see you in the land of Mordor. Death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates of fun, destroy the ring of power and wonder.
Hey, Middle-earth role-playing fans and Lord of the Rings fans in general, welcome back to the channel. Sorry it's been so long, but I've actually been out in St. John's, Newfoundland. Got screeched in, which is pretty cool. Saw some whales, saw some puffins, saw some really cool fortresses. St. John's, Newfoundland is an amazing place.
Well, it was on last Monday morning, and the day been calm and fine, to the harbour grace excursion with the boys to have a time. And just before the sailor took the gangway from the pier, I saw some fella haul me wife on board of the Volunteer. Oh me, oh my, I heard me old wife cry. Oh me, oh my, I think I'm gonna die. Oh me, oh my, I heard me old wife say, I wish I'd never taken this excursion around the bay.
I rented a car when I was there and was able to drive around the Avalon Peninsula. It's a big province. If you don't know anything about geography of Canada, it's a huge province. I really wanted to go to a place called L'Anse Meadows where the Vikings had landed in Canada, but that's like 11 hours away, and there was no way I was driving there on a 5-day trip. But we did go up to Signal Hill where they made the first Trans-Canada telegraph communication or radio communication, whatever it was. I can't remember my Canadian heritage minutes right now off the top of my head. So I went up to Signal Hill, which used to be a British fort up there, all the way up until the end of World War II. And across the Narrows was another fort called Fort Amherst to guard the harbor of St. John's.
I'm kneeling at the altar of my nightly post, so I'll raise a glass, not the first or last. Come join me in this toast, because the old black rum's got a hold of me like a dog wrapped round my leg. And the old black rum's got a hold of me when I am for another.
Pretty cool place. A lot of fog though. Then I went to Cape Spear, which is the most eastern point of Canada. And on to Petty Harbour, home of Alan Doyle of Great Big Sea, if anyone's a fan of Celtic folk rock music. And also went over to a place called Placentia to see the up on Castle Hill where there used to be an old French fort before the British drove them out. So some pretty cool stuff to see. And great to be home. Beautiful place. Wouldn't want to live there, but a beautiful place to visit. Anyway, so let's get on with this one. We are looking at the Fortress of Calenhad. This is 8203 of the series. Technically it's the fourth book of the Fortress series. Halls of the Elven King came out before this, but it's 8204, and this one came after. For some reason, this one was probably sitting on the shelf or still not quite finished, and they were rushing to get a new book out. They released Halls of the Elven King before it. So as you can see, I have my copy here. I cannot remember where I bought this. Probably I'm going to say Imperial Hobbies in London. Didn't pay much for it, maybe $12. It was released in 1990. And the cover work is by David and Elise Martin. So it's not Agnes McBride. And you can tell it's not up to the same standards as Agnes McBride. Now, I'm going to be honest, I never played this when I had it. I had read it a couple times, but never used any of it. I had too many other books to use and didn't get around to using this book. But, without further ado, let's check it out. So, back to the table we are. Just looking at this cover, this fortress looks huge, and I don't think that the Beacon Towers of Gondor are anywhere close to being that size. So this is a completely MERP creation. If you read the description of the Beacon Towers in the Unfinished Tales and in Return of the King, you'll note that they're not anywhere close to being such a size. There's nothing on the inside cover. You got the table of contents, introduction of the Fortress series, the terminology adapting this module, hits and bonuses, conversion chart. Goes through the background. It gives the conversation between Pippin and Gandalf in Return of the King. And the War of Beacons are already lit. But There's also the red arrow. So Gondor uses two things. They use the beacon towers and they use the red arrow. It gives a tale of years, which is pretty sure. The beacon towers were never seriously threatened in the history of Gondor until the War of the Ring. And you gotta remember, these beacon towers were not used so much because back in the day, before the return of Sauron, they had the Palantir. They had the Master Stone of Skillet before it was lost in the Civil War. They had the Stone of Minas Ithil, the Stone of Minas Anor, and the Stone at Orthanc. So those four stones pretty much kept watch over the original bounds of Gondor and beyond. They wouldn't need a beacon system, though they kept the beacon. They did have a rudimentary beacon system in place long before, as a warning to the people of Anorion and Calenhad. But as Calenhad declined in population, it became less and less important. They weren't going to send aid down to Minas Tirith, being hard-pressed to hold the line of the Anduin, weren't going to send aid north as well. Not until the arrival of the Rohirrim. So you get a nice terrain map. It's on a hill, and you get all these towers and stuff, so it's a pretty big fortress. A brief history of the beacon towers, and it does go through a section of the Unfinished Tales. I wouldn't call that a brief history, it's actually a pretty big history. All the way up to the Lord of the Rings. And then the surrounding lands. Now they do give a town of Kalost here, which is never mentioned at all. But it wouldn't be surprising that there would be a small town near this beacon tower. The Rohirrim were just not agriculturalists and pastoralists. They also settled in small villages and towns dotted around Rohan. The Calenhadans did the same thing. It's just that there were fewer people, so they were spread out more. So Kalos means green town, lies approximately 30 miles northeast of Calenhad and 12 miles north of Min Rimmon. The Great Road passes through the village. So you get a nice village. This is actually a pretty good map. You could use this in a campaign. Let's say during the War of the Ring, orcs did penetrate this far, and you could hold the bridge until the Rohirrim arrive, something like that. Or you could use this anywhere. It gives layouts for the town itself and all the various buildings. And it has the Grey Wood, the Aaron myth, the Grey Wood, which it's situated on. And then you get a manor, the Manor of Fordellen. So a typical manor house that you would find in the region. So they're going with a 1640 time period before the Rohirrim. So not much is happening at this beacon tower. Many Dunedain manor houses. So it just gives a description of this manor house. And then traveling to Calenhad. Gives a history of Calenhad, which basically means green space. So Calenhad is the sixth beacon of Gondor, running in line from Minas Tirith up to the Halifrian, or Halifirian. And it probably means green space with reference to the flat, turf-covered crown on the hill. So even during the War of the Ring, it was not under any kind of attack. The one around Amundin, which is the closest one and probably the oldest one to Minas Tirith, was the one that would probably be attacked by forces coming out of Caranandros during the War of the Ring, and were blocking the way of the Rohirrim. But then the Druidain were in the woods too, hunting them down, so who knows what was going on. Okay, and then we go right into the layout of Calenhad. So you get the middle and inner bailey. Now I really think they overkilled this one for a beacon tower. If anything, this book should have been all 7 beacon towers, made them all a little different, but not as big. So you get the fortress, the outer bailey, the gatehouse, and it gives descriptions of all the various gatehouse entries, including a kettle chamber where they can pour hot water or oil or whatever onto an enemy, and your typical watchtower. So here's the gatehouse, there's the kettle room right down there, and the winches. Then going back, so the third level is the rooftop and the sentry walk. Then you get the watchtowers, which are on the other page. Then you get the first of the big towers, the Tinter, the Morning Seeker on this one. So you have the cellar, ground level, second level. Not really much to these rooms. Then you get the Tinter third, fourth, and fifth level. third level helps you get on the walls, and they would have wartime barracks. Then you get the Turin Nafun, the Guardian of the Night tower. Again, cellar, ground level, second level, third level, fourth level. Then in the middle bailey you have the Terrestel tower. So again, you get a description of the Turin Nafun, the Night Tower. The last 3 levels. Then you're going into the Terrestrial. And you can see the cellar, the ground level, and the second level. It also has 6 levels total. And then next one you go to the Turn Na Runhill, which has dungeons. So a lower dungeon, access hall, and inner cells. And that you can see the description here. It has an upper dungeon, doors to the middle bailey, doors to the inner bailey, guard room, prison records, another guard room, access corridors, offices, armories, map and chart room, meeting chamber, interview room. On the third level you see the military court of justice. The fourth level has the quarters for the third Tiroman or guard. So there's more description for these ones. Fifth level has a fight. Sixth level has a soldier solarium. And they have a 7th level for this one, an observation chamber. Now in the middle of the book you get a nice picture of what this looks like spread out map. This place is huge. Like, look at the scale. You see 2 guys down here on horseback walking up the road. And then you see a little encampment here in the middle of the middle bailey or lower bailey. So this place is huge. It would take hundreds of men just to guard this tower. So I really do think Merp over-exaggerated this by just a tad. Then you go in the inner bailey, you have the wall towers there. You have the long barracks, and then the little barracks. So the long barracks has a ground level and second level. The little barracks, same thing, ground level, second level. Stables where you keep the horses. There'd be a smithy as well. And then finally you get to the actual beacon tower itself. So it has a cellar before going up to the ground level. Now in the ground level they have a practice room for missiles, practice room for pole arms, and a practice room for melee, so 40, 43, 44, 45. I think for missiles they go outside for that, archery practice. Pole arms and stuff, yeah, you might have a gym for that. But only in rainy weather. Most of the time you go outside. Or if at night maybe. Second level has access to the walls. On the second level they have the Great Hall, which is here. And then you have a place for the king or the Lord of the Tower. Then you're going up into the third level, nothing special there. Hall of the Captain, healing chamber, captain's study, captain's parlor. Quarters for the first Tiroman, the elite guards. And then it gives all the chambers for each one. The fifth level has the Beacon-wardens chamber. Sixth level has the king's chambers when he comes around once a year to inspect stuff. So that would be his whole floor would be for him. A seventh level and eighth level. And the eighth level has a beacon of clear land dome. Land is like a volcanic glass, which is hard. In Middle Earth role-playing, there's either black or red land, so black volcanic glass or red volcanic glass. They're probably using red for this one. Clear land dome set in a cornice of marble supported by... Now that would be expensive, and land is something that's another fantasy Dungeons and Dragons type idea. Tolkien never mentions land at all in his works, not that I've ever seen. And it gives a procedure performed by a magician, illusionist, alchemist, sorcerer, monk, or mystic. Cause flames to sprout from the beacon's pipes. Further manipulation control the brightness, color, and duration. Codes of blanks allow the conveyance of complex messages of the fire. Now that's really sophisticated and too much, I think. So the beacon itself is way too much. They would have like a simple fire. They might have copper mirrors to reflect light and have a code that you could, or you cover it up and then blink it. That would make sense. But I think these are mostly simple beacon towers. Nothing extravagant. Now we go to Calenhad at other times. So from the original signal platform, which would be these signal platforms, this most likely is what it is by the War of the Ring. Very simple in construction. Don't need a lot of men to, because most of the men actually lived in huts in the tree line, and would perform their duties during the day and night. They'd have a rotation of troops. It would be a rotational position. So to me, this is most likely what they'd be. I know in the Peter Jackson movies, they had guys on the top of the mountain living in huts, like a couple of guys, and all they do is light it. Look like they're freezing their ass up there. No, these are on hills, foothills. They're not actually in the White Mountains itself. That doesn't make any sense. Peter Jackson's lighting of the beacons was way too showy for what it should be. Then they have a signal tower with a little more. They could also have been signal towers, especially the one on Amundin, which is closer to the front lines. Might have been upgraded in defense in case of attack out of Calenhad during the War of the Ring. So that one makes sense. So these are more feasible than what they have in this book. Beacon Tower Bailey, then it gives the construction of Calenhad, how it was constructed better. And then it goes into the garrison at Calenhad. So if you look at that picture, it looks like they have a huge garrison. But no, they don't. They have a small garrison. The 3rd Tiroman is made up of recruits, new arrivals, numbering about 15 guys. In times of strife, maybe 22, if they feel the need to reinforce it. The 2nd Tiroman, which is made up of veterans, numbers 32. So 32 and 15 is only 47. Then the 1st Tiroman are veterans, like knights, and there's only 14 of them. So those are 61 guys to... There's no way 61 guys are going to defend that whole tower. All that. That's just ridiculous. There's no way in hell. They also have the Turnafuin, or Night Watchers. And there's only about 15 of them. So now you're up to 76. And then they have the Tiri, or Watchers from the Land, which are recruited from the local villages and towns in the nearby area, like Camelot. And there's only maybe 20 of them. So now you're up to 96. So less than 100 plus commanders. You're looking at just over a garrison of 100 men to defend something that big. That's ridiculous. That's just like the Weathertop book they had. The fortress was way too big for the garrison they had. Made no sense at all. Which is why I think they had only these. Signal tower, simple tower, nothing special. Or a signal platform. And then you can use these numbers for all the towers, because you don't need that many guys to watch a signal platform. Remember, these beacon towers were never really threatened at all until the War of the Ring, when the last two Amundin was probably threatened. Because during the War of the Ring, a force out of the Black Gate came through North Ithilien, took Calenhad, and then came over. Because you can't invade from here because of the wet marshes of the Nindolf. There's no way in hell you're going to be able to do that. The Entwash, which is what defends Anorian, the river and the Entwash. Only at Calenhad is there a real crossing point, and that's defended. War of the Ring, an army from Mordor took Calenhad and then crossed over and sent a blocking force on the North Road to make sure Rohan couldn't get there in time. If they did come, they would have to fight in the Druiden forest. Luckily, they came behind Amundin through a back old quarry road, and allowed them to get around that blocking force. And then after the Battle of Pelennor Fields, a force led by Elfhelm went and relayed and drove them out. So that's what happened during the War of the Ring. So then it gives adventuring around Calenhad, Second Age adventurers, when the first beacon were probably being constructed. Numenorians were setting up their colonies around in Anorian and spreading out. Yeah, there would be some adventurers. Third Age adventurers, traveling to Calenhad, staying the night, hearing someone wanting to kill someone and run away with their wife. The whole Clue murder mystery plot. Another adventure like finding a small child mauled by a wolf. He's still alive, but just barely. Getting him to a healer. So going back to the manor and the town. That would be another one. Would be bandits at work or a thief. So tracking that. Small group of orcs have destroyed an entire village. So you got to look for them. And then during the War of the Ring, fearing a major assault and putting the place for defense. Or you can find yourself in the middle of a siege from orcs. Fourth Age adventures, not much new. The possibility for orcs attacking might be during the War of the Dwarves and Orcs, when orcs were trying to establish colonies in the White Mountains after being forced out of the Misty Mountains. That would be a possibility, because Rohan faced that problem for years. Afterwards, Gondor didn't have to face it as much because the orcs concentrated on the northern face instead of the southern face of the White Mountains. But it is possible that a roving band of orcs coming through the mountains, though going through the Pass of the Dead would have killed a lot of orcs. They wouldn't have made it far past that point. So I don't see orcs really traveling that far south. Mainly, but it is a possibility. If you want to play that like that. So the adventures aren't very good as far as that goes. But you could transport this fortress somewhere else and have better adventures. You have a master garrison table. A master NPC table. Other NPCs around Calenhad. And then finally a product list. So that is a look at what's inside the Calenhad Beacon of Gondor. Now, what did I think of this book? As far as the Fortress series go, it wasn't my favorite, simply because it's just too massive for a Beacon Tower of Gondor. I thought they really overdid it. Makes me wonder if the people who created this book ever read Lord of the Rings or Unfinished Tales. I know you use quotes from it, but they didn't actually delve deep into it, because they made this thing way too massive for what it should be. So I never used any of the adventures or layouts, like I said. You could transport it somewhere else and play it. It would make a pretty cool fortress. I would have put this down in Gondor, maybe, or even in the Dol Runen area as a massive fortress to watch over a large area and a base for operations. But as far as the Beacon Tower goes, this is just too ridiculously big for something so simple. So the Fortress series so far, definitely not my favorite. Towers of the Teeth and Amon Sul are much better books. Amon Sul, again, was also kind of overly done, maybe, considering the size of the garrison, but Towers of the Teeth was definitely far superior. So that's what I think of the book, the Calenhad book. All you Middle-earth role-playing fans, let me know what you guys think of this book. Were you able to use it? Did you play it? Do you have it? Were you able to use it? What'd you think? Do you agree that it's overly done and it should have been somewhere else like Gondor? So leave comments in the comment section. Until next time, I'm Roman Daisel. I am out of here.